Welcome back to another episode of Rotator Cuff Expert. I'm Dr. Orca, and today we're going to talk about something that's actually a little bit serious, and it's depression. Depression, we see it a lot, and obviously we're probably more aware of depression these days than we've been aware of it in the past, and I think that will continue to be a big deal as we go forward, and in trying to take care of patients who are depressed is a challenge that typically we as orthopedic surgeons don't do a very good job of. But this is an interesting study that was done relating depression to shoulder injury and shoulder surgery. Before we start, if you are concerned or worried that you might hurt yourself or hurt somebody else, please go see your doctor as soon as possible. There's lots of lots of ways that we can help, and so please do that. This is super important. People care about you and people love you and want you to be safe. So this study was actually specifically not about rotator cuff tears or rotator cuff repairs. It's specifically about, they used glenohumeral joint instability. So that's if you dislocated your shoulder. I think it doesn't really matter too much as far as what the shoulder injury, if you have a shoulder injury and it affects you, it can create depression. And actually this study followed 76 patients and saw that over half, 51%, were clinically depressed preoperatively. So we don't know what that means. Were they clinically depressed for years before their shoulder injury, or did the shoulder injury and limitations of that shoulder injury, did that create depression? We don't know that information. So there's a lot of things we don't really understand about this study, but there's some good information here. So 51% of people were depressed before surgery, and they used a special kind of test that has been clinically validated. There's a scale that they use, and the scale is 0 to 26, 26 being the most severely depressed and 0 being not depressed. And they use a number that's cut off that's generally accepted number of 6. So if you were above 6 when you self-rated, we would say that you're clinically depressed and put you in the clinically depressed category for the study. If you were below 6, then you were considered not depressed. So these are some of the takeaways from this study. 51% were depressed preoperatively, and they also looked a year after, and 21% were depressed 1 year later. So that's pretty significant. Sorry, it's 24% 1 year later. So it's a pretty significant decrease, but there's still a large amount of people who are depressed, even a year later after shoulder surgery. And this is typically a surgery that we would do on a younger, healthier population. So we don't know really how that would relate to rotator cuff. You think, well, older, less healthier, maybe they're less depressed, or maybe they're more depressed, or maybe they're easier to be depressed. I don't know. I mean, we don't know that. That's not really defined in this study. We do know, if we look at people who have rotator cuff tears, and we look at the studies, that somewhere between 12% and 24% of people who have rotator cuff tear have clinical depression. But they use a slightly different, depending on the study, use a slightly different tool to determine depression. So that's part of it. So that's a lot of people. That means if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling down, if you're feeling lonely after your shoulder injury and after your shoulder surgery, unfortunately, you're in good company. Lots of people do. And so don't feel like you're alone. And again, that's where we have this group, right? Me talking to you, and that's helpful. But also that's where the Rotator Cuff Expert and Rotator Cuff Facebook group, private Facebook group, is super important. So you won't feel alone. So you'll feel a part of it, like a part of the community. And if you go there and if you go into the Facebook group, you will see a lot of like-minded people trying to fight through this, trying to figure the way out and figure the way through the recovery, because part of this issue is it's a long recovery too. But don't forget that people are depressed even before surgery. And so unfortunately, if you have more severe clinical depression, so if you're in that higher number, right, 24, 25, if you're more clinically depressed preoperatively, unfortunately, the severity of pre-op depression will relate to the severity of post-op depression, and that will actually relate to a worse outcome. So if you have more severe depression, which would make sense, I think we all could understand, if you're more depressed in general, then if you go through a hard surgery, you're probably gonna have a little bit worse outcome than if you're less depressed, right? If you're not depressed, if you're not within that clinical, that determination of clinical depression, right? If you're in that below 6, then you actually will have a better outcome than if you are clinically depressed. And the severity of your clinical depression will also relate to the severity of your outcome. So the outcome was scored in a different way, Western Ontario score, which is a function of a shoulder function score, has nothing to do with depression. So we know, unfortunately, that if you have more severe depression, you're going to have a worse shoulder outcome. And if you're not clinically depressed, you're going to have a better shoulder outcome. So what that says to us as clinicians, and what that says to you as patients, is that we really need to do our best to get a handle on depression preoperatively and try to manage that preoperative depression so we can get that number down so we can have a better outcome, or maybe get it down to where you're not clinically depressed and get that better outcome. So take care of yourself. If you're afraid you're going to hurt yourself, or you're afraid you're going to hurt someone else, please go get some help. If you're not in that severe of a shape, but you're not doing well, you're sad, you're depressed, you're frustrated, which almost everybody is in recovery of shoulder surgery, whether it's for instability or whether it's for a rotator cuff tear, get help, talk to people, join a group like ours, if it's not ours, someone like ours, where you can talk to people and relate so you don't feel like you're going through this alone. So I hope this helps. Care for you. I want the best for you, and we'll see you next time.